Greetings and welcome back to Advanced Turn-Based Combat. This is Part 4, and I am Aaron Craig with Beyond Us Games. This section is going to be the bulk of the series. We're going to do a lot of work and actually make it so we can choose from multiple players and attack multiple enemies, and then set it up so that when you have killed all of your enemies, you win and you gain the experience and then the items they might have. So let's go ahead and dive in. The bulk of our time is going to be spent in the battle controller inside of the step event for menu selection during battles. So I'm going to go ahead and full screen this and increase the size. So here we want to change this entire thing up so that we can choose from our party and choose from the enemy party. So we need to add in all of the variables we created last time and set up a system so that we know who we're selecting and who is attacking and who's being attacked. So we're going to start off. I'm going to use some comments here just to make sure, because we're going to be typing quite a bit, and this is going to become a long section of code, and comments are always a good thing when you are typing out a lot. So we're going to start with choosing a player. And we're going to use the if statement and use the variable is selecting player. Now, inside of here, we want to use the keyboard check for S and W because we're going to be going up and down for our players. So we're going to use if keyboard check pressed board S. And we're actually going to be just one line of code after this if statement, and we're going to be using a clamp. Now, if you're not familiar with a clamp, it is kind of what it says it is. It keeps the value of something from going above or below a threshold that you set. It's a hard press so that it can't exceed whatever you want. So in this case, we have an array of players. And if we ever try to increase player chosen beyond the array size, we're going to get an error. The game is going to crash and we're going to have a lot of problems. So by using a clamp, we can make sure that it never goes beyond what the actual size of the array is. So it's going to equal clamp, and inside of here, we're going to actually increase it. So player chosen, 0. So the 0 is for the minimum, and then we're going to say the maximum is array length, 1D. And this will be for the player party, but we're going to do -1 because remember, array length player party is actually going to return 3, which is greater than the actual array because we start at 0. And so this is going to try to increase player chosen. And if it can, it will. But if it's already too high, it's going to keep it the exact same, and then player chosen will be set. And by doing that, it's a very simple system, but it keeps it from ever going outside of the bounds. Because when you're using arrays, you have to be very careful you never try to access something that isn't yours, because it's memory that you don't own. And we're going to do W. So the way I'm looking at this is S is going down, but you're actually increasing the player chosen. If you wanted to start like at the bottom player and go up, that would be fine too, and you can just alter this however you want. For me, this is an easy way to think about it, and it just kind of makes sense. So again, we're going to use a clamp here. We're going to subtract this time 1 from player chosen. The minimum will again be 0, and the maximum will again be the same. So this just makes sure that we will never go outside of the array that we have. So then we want to choose, once we've selected the player, now we need to actually, press enter or spacebar or whatever we're using and actually say we're going to attack or act with them. So if keyboard check, VK enter is how you do enter. We're going to do an OR symbol here, which you can also just do OR. Keyboard check. We're going to put VK space, just so that you can do either one. Now we need to alter the variables that we have in place, because when you move from one section to the other, we've got draw events and we've got things that are checking only when we are in a certain phase or in a certain selection. So we need to check and change, is selecting player equals false, and is selecting from menu will equal true. So that moves us from player selection to menu selection, which is great. Now the thing that we need to do is set up a menu selection. So choosing from menu. And we want to come over here and we want to use the else if, and I can't remember if we've introduced this already, and yeah, we probably have. So the reason we're doing an else if here is because inside of these selecting player and selecting from menu, then we're going to also be selecting an enemy, is that when we press enter or space, we don't want it to go on through each step. And that's something I encountered where if you just use an if statement here, you press enter when you're selecting a player, but it's going to then go and press enter on the menu selection and enter on the attack. So like you would choose a player and then all of a sudden you're attacking before you even know what happened. But by using else if, you will only act within the selection that you are wanting to act in. So we're going to say is selecting from menu. And we're going to put a curly bracket here, but then we actually want to use most of this code that we already have in place. What we don't want to use is this escaping part. So I'm going to put the end curly brace right here. And I'm going to select everything that I've got and press tab. And then it looks, indented and it looks much nicer. So that's great. Actually, my bad. We want to do escaping. What we don't want to do is undoing selection, because we're going to alter that in a little bit. But once we do that, then we can choose from the menu. Now, we want to come over here, though, and change selecting an enemy, because now, once we choose to attack, it's not just going to automatically attack. So we want to change this. And the other thing we want to do, which is also just very useful, is the control find feature. So we're going to control F, and what we want to do is actually find all obj Sarah, because remember, when making it general, you need to get rid of specifics, and we're going to replace it with player party bracket player chosen. And we just want to replace everything right there. So that will make it so that everything is completely generic. And the last thing for here is there's SPR Sarah shoot right, which is not what we want. So we actually want to have it be player party player chosen dot my anims, and I believe it is 4 is the one that we want, because that's the one that is the attack animation for whoever it will be attacking, which is great. And what we actually want to do here is have, if it's not selecting enemy, we want to add in a few more variables, because we are going to change it from selecting from menu to selecting an enemy. So we want to do selecting enemy equals true, but then is selecting from menu will equal false. And we're actually going to take this entire piece of code, we're going to cut it out, and we're actually going to paste it down inside of when we choose an enemy to fight. So we'll come in here and we are going to add another code. And again, we're going to use an else if statement here. So if we are selecting enemy, let's go ahead and go down here a couple times. We're going to paste this in, and I'll show you exactly where it goes. Just going to make the indents right, make sure it looks nice. Okay, so we're going to put that right about there, and I think we only want to have it be an if statement this time, because there's no else here. But that way, when we choose the enemy that we want, it then attacks correctly. And in the selecting enemy, we want to also add in a few keyboard checks. So again, we're going to use S and W, but it's going to be not for selecting a player, but for selecting an enemy. So it is perfectly fine for reusing those keys because we're in a different menu selection. So we're going to use almost the exact same thing. Enemy chosen equals clamp, increase enemy chosen, 0, and then array length 1D. And this time we use enemy party. And don't forget the -1, otherwise you'll get array out of bounds errors. And we don't actually need these brackets. We're going to again do a keyboard check with ORD and W. And almost the exact same thing, except we are subtracting 1 this time. Ooh, having a hard time typing here. Okay, so now we are subtracting, and this code right here is actually going to say, you know, this is actually going to say we want to attack the enemy now, which is exactly what we want to do. So let's go ahead and press play and see what happens. Because now we should actually be able to choose enemies and choose players just from that changing the code right there. But if I made any typos or anything like that, we're going to have issues. So we'll go ahead and go in. Okay, I press W, I press S, I move up, I move down. So let's select Vera. And here we go. So we have one error because we did a lot of coding, so you're going to have some errors, which is normal. So player chosen, did not type that correctly. So down here I can see it's at line 73. Right here. Okay. Just got to learn how to type. But one error out of a couple dozen lines of code is not too bad. Okay, select Vera, and ooh, it just went right into attacking. Let's see what happened. Okay, so it is kind of working, but I can't actually select another enemy because as soon as I select one, oh, and you'll see the, now we've got 3 Sarahs. We'll worry about that on the next part. So the reason that it's doing that is because this if statement right here just checks the player's energy. And we wanted to check one thing more. We want to say if we've actually clicked on the keyboard that we want to attack. So that was the error there. So we're going to go ahead and say VK space, and we'll put an and statement right there. All right, and after we've got this part set up so that we can actually attack, we should be able to now select from a player, choose an enemy, and actually attack whichever one we want and be able to kill them. What we're going to add in next, though, is actually going to make it so that when we drop their health below 0, something actually happens. Because right now, we can choose any of them, but damaging them doesn't do anything. You can see the spider at the bottom right there is still attacking, even though he's dead. So we're going to come into the parent of the enemy, and we're going to add in a variable called isActive, and we're going to set this equal to true. Now we need to alter a few things inside of the enemy parent. So like both of these step events that we have, we want to add in an and we're going to set this isActive because we only want these things to happen while the enemy is actually alive. And we want to come in and add a piece of code. So check health / set isActive. And here we want to say if current health is less than or equal to 0. So if the enemy has actually been killed, we want to set, we're just going to set the current health equal to 0. We're going to set isActive equal to true. And the last thing is inside, we're going to say ++ dead enemies. Now we haven't actually created this yet, but it's okay. We're not going to run the game until we actually have that created. We also need to add in an isActive part here because we only want this to activate once. So we're going to have an if statement here as well that is going to check and see, is going to say what happens when the actual enemy dies, because once they're dead, we want it to not be a part of the battle anymore. So if it's not active, we're going to say current energy equals 0 and image alpha equals 0.25. When we do this, now it's going to become translucent and it's going to look like it's completely dead because it's not going to recharge energy and it's not going to have any health. And let's come up to the battle controller inside of the create event, add one more global variable here called dead enemies. Dead enemies needs to be set to 0. And then also inside of the character parent, when we collide, we want to set up the amount of dead enemies, which is 0. We want to reset it every time we start another battle, which is very important because otherwise after the first battle, it'll say that there's always 3 dead enemies or more depending on how many you had in that party, and then you'll never actually be able to really fight. So once we have that in place, we want to come back into the battle controller, and in our step event, we want to go into this checking win conditions. Because now that we have a system in place, and it's not the system that we originally set up, if you have followed from the beginning, I do have a null object, but I am altering this a little bit because as I actually code it and play with it some more, I get some better ideas. And null is still very important in programming, but for here, I think specifically, if we don't set the enemies to null, it makes things a lot easier, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So we're going to actually get rid of, well, we're going to comment this out with a multi-line comment, because I want to borrow some of this stuff in just a second. But we're going to come in here, and we are going to set everything up so that once you have killed all of the enemies, you can then gain everything that you're supposed to get. So let's go ahead and get started on that, and this will be the last big thing that we do. So if dead enemies is equal to array length 1D of enemy party. Now this is going to get a little confusing because we're actually going to use 2 for loops here. And when you start doing multiple for loops, it gets difficult to keep track of. You gotta have some real practice and real practice actually mapping it out to see exactly what's going to happen. I will do my best to explain it, but if you copy along, you should be just fine. And I'm using a J here now because we can't reuse I because I is already in use inside of this for loop. And we're going to put player party here, and we're going to increase player party. What we're going to do here is we are going to set every player that's alive to gain the amount of experience that each enemy has. So that's why we have the first for loop. We are going to go through and cycle through each enemy. But we also want to give each player the respective amount of experience that they are supposed to gain. So that's why we have this player party inside of this for loop. The line of code is actually pretty simple. Player party J, because we want to start at 0 and give we want to give Sarah experience for every single enemy out there. So player party J dot current XP plus equals enemy party I dot XP. So inside of this for loop, it's got 2 loops going. So the first one is going to say J is equal to 0. So Sarah here is equal to, gains experience equal to the first enemy because it's going to be I equals 0. But then I is going to stay the same while J increases. So we've got, let me make sure I know the character name. So we've got Sarah first is going to gain the experience of the Doom Bunny. And then it's going to go up 1. J will move up 1, but I will stay the same. So then Vera will gain the experience, and then Kira will gain the experience, and then it's going to pop out. It's going to say J is now less than, or is now greater than or equal to the player party, so it's going to go out. And it's going to come up to this first for loop, and it's going to increase I by 1, and then it's going to come back here and reset j. So now it's on the second enemy, and each player will gain that amount, and it will continue for all of the enemies and all of the player party. So that's a way to give experience to all of them. And in here, if you wanted to get items from all of the enemies that had them or see if they did, this would be a really good place to do it, because you are going through and you are touching every single player and every single enemy. So if you wanted to do anything extra like loot drops, this would be the place to do it. Now we want to come in here inside of the first for loop, and we're going to say with enemy party I, we're actually going to destroy it, because we don't want them to persist after we leave this battle room. And after we've assigned experience from the enemy, we're going to go ahead and get rid of it. But then we also need to come in here and say if I is equal to array length of the enemy party, break. What break does is it says get out of whatever you're in. So inside of this for loop, we want to get out once we have reached the end of it, because otherwise it's going to continuously loop through and your character will gain an unlimited amount of experience, which maybe you want, but you're going to be stuck in a loop and you can't actually play the game. So that's no good. Then we're going to come down here. We're going to use another for loop. And we're going to reuse I because that's okay. And we're going to set it equal to 1 and less than array length 1D player party plus plus I. And here we're going to use another with statement, and we're going to actually destroy the players except for Sarah, because otherwise they all spawn in just like happened earlier. So you can also do this a different way. Right now we are not storing the experience of the other two players. There are several ways that you could do that. For one, you could just deactivate these instances instead of destroying them, and then activate them anytime you want to look at their stats. Like if you opened up the menu or when you came back into a battle, you would just reactivate them. Another way would be to have a grid or a 2D array or a 1D array inside of each character that holds all of their experience. A 2D array you could hold inside of Sarah or the stat keeper here, and actually have it keep track of the experience, the items, and everything that every player had. There's a lot of different ways, and I don't want to get into that right now. So we're just going to destroy them so that we can move on. And we want to say we're going to borrow from here. So we're actually going to just copy and paste this section of code because we want to leave. And we want to, again, replace obj Sarah with player party, and we're going to put 0 here because whatever the first player is the one that will be shown on the map. If you wanted to have the option of actually having Vera or Kira or a different party member show up as the main sprite, you could certainly do that. This is just going to say take the first player party, put them back where they're supposed to go. And we want to say my anims, and let's double check which one walking down is. Walk down is 3. My anims 3. Okay. So we've written a lot of code here. Let's press play and see if we have everything working properly. All right, we can enter in here. Let's go down to this enemy just to see what happens. Okay, I can still select. Let's try attacking here. All right, good. So I'm going to go through and play this and beat up all of these guys and see what happens. So the first thing that should happen, all right, so this is a good thing to look at. So battle controller, normal event, line 22, sprite index equals my anims 3. Trying to index what is not an array. Okay, so inside of here, what we have to add in is this player party 0.myanims, because we need to actually access where these anims are coming from. Otherwise, it has no idea where to access them from. Okay, so let's go over to this enemy, see if we can get some weaker ones so we can kill them faster. Okay, so when the Mr. Ninja dies, it should go away. Now you can see here that our XP has gone up, which is great, but we didn't actually want to leave the battle after killing one enemy. So the problem here, let's go to enemy parent, check set health here. So is active equals false. That will do it. When it was true, it would go through and it would redo that line of code pretty much infinitely, and we didn't want it to increase dead enemies more than just one. So now that that's taken care of, we can come in here and we can kill him. And you can see here all of his stats are 0 and he has gone transparent, which is fantastic. So let's go ahead and take out the other two enemies and see what happens. Okay, so he's gone. Now we just have one Doom Bunny left. And you can also see that you can select dead enemies. That's something that we'll take care of in the next part. But let's go ahead and finish this Doom Bunny off and see. We have 0 experience. We come out, we've got 20. There we go. That's exactly what we wanted to have happen. Sarah's back right where she was. The enemy has vanished, and we don't have 2 other clones of her walking around. Okay, that is a really good battle system that we've got in place. There's several little things that we want to add in to make the game a little more playable, such as making dead enemies not being able to be selected. We want to be able to back up out of our menu selection and out of our enemy selection in case we actually wanted to attack with someone else or we wanted to do a different option. We also need to set it so that the players, when they die, they go to an inactive state and that they cannot be selected to attack with. Those are things that we are going to address in the next part when we start polishing up our game, but the base of it, the foundation, is here. We have multiple enemies, multiple player characters, and we can select. So this is a full party turn-based combat system that we have working, which is fabulous. So thank you guys for joining me so much. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please leave them in the section below. I try to get back to every single comment. Until next time, have fun making great games, and I will talk to you later.